we're at Tutor Talk. This is Jason, our resident European car guru and editor of Das Euro on our blog. This is our friend Jared. He writes for a nameless car magazine that we will discuss at the moment. Our topic tonight to start is going to be iconic cars that the new model has been a disappointment in one way or another. So obvious cars that come to mind are the GTR, the Acura NSX,
M3, the M3,
and the M3, and of course you brought that up.
It's what I do.
It's your thing.
we don't know for sure yet, but the Supra.
The Supra, which is the gray market, but I'm not hopeful.
The new GT is pretty awesome, but it's harder to get. Yeah, but it's harder to get than the outgoing one.
I have my problems with the new Ford GT.
Okay, but and then the FRS, which is another Japanese iconic car like the Skyline that we never really had the American version, but it became popular later. It took a long time for the 8086 to be the icon.
The original Corolla.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, so we all have stronger points. I'm a big JDM and I own an NSX. So the NSX, it's hard to. It's like a sequel to a good movie. It's hard to make the sequel better than the original.
Well, typically when sequels work well, they don't try to take the thing that made the first movie great and expand on them. They'll either like introduce another storyline or they'll change it somehow.
Unless you talk about Aliens.
And it doesn't ruin the first one. Well, yeah. Look at the Rockies though. Like some of the Rockies were awesome, and a lot of it's because it had nothing to do with the like just certain details or whatever. You know.
Yeah, the argument that I've heard towards the NSX, and I don't necessarily buy this argument, is that what the original NSX did for the supercar is bring it to this comfortable, affordable, maintainable level. And if you look at the modern day NSX compared to, I guess, something like a Lamborghini or a Ferrari, the hybrid system sort of makes it more livable because it's better on gas and you can put it in silent electric mode.
It was the NSX, other than all these cars, the NSX was an icon the day it was built.
It's Pininfarina.
The Japanese, and you can't say that because the Japanese built the 2000 GT, which was like their first real Japanese supercar.
Yeah.
But when they built the NSX, they built a car that looked like a modern supercar of its day. It looked like a Ferrari because Pininfarina designed it. But it was all the good looks of a Ferrari with none of the maintenance problems.
Yeah.
And that's why they're still around.
Yeah.
Those Ferraris from back in the day, the 328s,
it made Ferrari learn how to build a car because at that point
there was no competition.
Yeah, there was no other game in town.
Lamborghini wasn't competition back then because they were burning every 5 minutes.
Well, not only that, but and every NSX owner just got in his car and drove it.
Right.
Like it was only at the shop for like scheduled maintenance, and that's pretty much it.
And plus, it was one of those things where Acura had just really been created.
As a mark.
And they started. And if you look at, Acura, what's funny is you look at, Acura and Infiniti and, Lexus. Lexus is the only company that's now back in Japan. Acura, they still don't make an Acura in Japan. Lexus is the only brand that really carried up. But,
Lexus is a whole other
But
topic.
the NSX, I think the new car just took too long. And
there was such a hype for it. It was like 8 years. We're going to see it.
It's like the Supra's going through it right now.
Yeah. The LFA had this, although
I wish they would have said the LFA was a Supra, and I think everybody would have been happy.
Oh, absolutely. Despite the price tag.
Despite the price tag. Yeah. But the NSX, it took so long to get, it took so long to develop that now you have 2 generations old infotainment systems that are laggy and don't work. The car is one of those things that grows on you a little bit. It's not as horrible looking as I thought it was when I first saw it.
I think the rear is better. I don't love the front. I think it looks
to be honest,
I think it looks like 2 different cars.
Like me being sort of on the European side of things, I think the car looks really good. Like I didn't love the styling of the first NSX.
Is it better looking than an R8?
No, it's not better looking than an R8, but it's cool. Like I saw it and I was like,
that's a good point.
The way that
I think the car looks. I think the original NSX tried to be an Italian supercar, and it did it. The new one's trying to be an R8. I think it's trying to be a European sports car.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's too little, too late. the car, I mean, Motor Trend magazine called it the most boring supercar they've ever tested.
That's terrible.
That's horrible.
More boring than a McLaren.
And I think that's why Toyota has been waiting, and they built the RCF, and it's fairly popular. The LC is doing really well. Everybody kind of wants one. And when they build the Supra, they have a lot to live up to.
I think that Japan does a really good job when they make a car, kind of like what you were leading into before, when they do something like sort of clean sheet. Like when they're just like, instead of making a car that's like this car, let's just make a car that does this thing. And they tend to do a good job when they do that.
Do you really think Japan's ever made a clean sheet? Because they copied Italy down to the designer on the NSX.
They copied the MG with the Miata.
But also think about it. When they built
well, go ahead.
Well, when they built it, it was an era where Senna, McLaren, and Honda were at the top of the food chain.
Sure.
And they had everybody in the world helping them build this car.
Yeah.
Because it was going to be the first Honda supercar, the first real Japanese supercar.
What I meant when I made that point is, if you look at like the first generation Lexuses that came out, like the LSs, the GSs, the ESs, and the SC.
The family sedan types.
Yeah. The LS is very clearly inspired by like
Mercedes S-Class.
They said it.
S-Class. Yeah. But it's incredibly boring. Like it does some of what the S-Class does right, but none of what it does right.
None of the pizzazz, none of the added.
Right.
I think the big problem with the NSX, and this might lead us into the next replacement car that we don't like very much, is that the requirements for what a driver's car have changed so much since that car, which is off screen, the NSX originally came out,
NSX,
which is when in the 90s, what was a supercar? It was a manual transmission because those were faster. It was a normal.
Mid-engine.
It was a mid-engine because that was the best for power, and it was good steering because they all sports cars like that had good steering. But the problem is that it needs to have a 0 to 60 time that gets published in a magazine.
Yeah.
It has to lap the Nürburgring in a certain amount of time.
G's in the corner.
People who have never driven a fast car but yet have a lot of money need to be able to step into it and drive it really, really well, which is the same as another car that we don't, all three of us like, the R35 GTR.
Oh,
extremely different from the R34, but I think that's because fast cars have changed the way that they function more.
You're absolutely correct. I think what it is that it's not really the car's fault. It's that that modern people are going to hate it when I say this, but modern drivers have de-evolved.
I was 100%
they're getting worse.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
It drives me crazy that there's a meme that shows a manual transmission and how people can't drive it. It's a theft deterrent.
No, I 100% agree. I was going to make the same point.
People.
I was going to make the same point. Like, before, I think the drivers that were like in their teens or 20s in the 90s or even the early 2000s, I think that those drivers, they took a lot more pride in their ability to drive and like honing their ability to drive and like going out and driving for fun. And people now just go, I just want a fast car. And the market is responding and going, okay, like you don't have that skill, fine.
The market rules because the market's going to make decisions. The
manufacturers are responding, I guess, in the market.
When I worked in auto wholesale for a while, and the first thing I learned is don't buy cars you like, buy cars that sell.
Yeah.
So you don't want to go buy that's a really cool Celica GTS. No, you got to go buy the Camry with the auto because that car will be gone next week.
Yeah, the manual transmission Camry. Right. I don't know what the last year you could get one of those is, but they did not sell very well.
And it's niche.
Probably still new on a lot.
But getting back to what we were talking about, you and I have both driven Skylines, the real Skylines, 32s, 33s,
one of the best cars I've ever driven.
And a deserving icon car. I don't know if you've ever driven one or not, but
I've driven an R32, and that's on my very short list of must-have Japanese cars.
You need to break your 34 Cherry at some point.
I will.
But the point is, that car became an icon. The 32 is probably the most race-prepped, aggressive
Probably
version.
Why I like it.
And kind of like the girls you dated in high school that were sleek and athletic, kind of got a little chunkier over time.
Yeah, the 34 is a big car.
The 33 is definitely a college girl, for sure.
I was asked a while back to what I would compare a Skyline to in the American market, and I said the Mustang. Because it's got a backseat it shouldn't have. And it's a sports car name only. if you look,
Yeah.
whenever I love pictures when you see the Supra and the NSX and the RX-7 and the Skyline.
And the
Skyline's the only one that has
yeah.
a back seat and a trunk.
Yeah.
RX-7 couldn't you get with a back seat as
Look,
well?
you try to sit.
Like a 911
you can
back
sit
seat.
in the back of an R34. You can put two friends in the back of an R34 and go to the movies, and it's no big deal.
Yeah.
But that car,
They do a 4-door version. They do a wagon.
so
They do...
that car is a perfect example of the market taking control of a concept. The GTR was a great car. People think they're all 1,000 horsepower. They're 300, roughly 300 horsepower.
Yeah.
You can make them really fast, really easily. But when the R35 came out, it's one of the first safety box cars. So
I agree.
it was basically built as a tank. Grandma could run 10s in.
Yeah.
And they're, my biggest dislike for those cars is that when I sit in it, I always feel like my head's hitting the roof.
Yeah.
But because you sit like in a high chair. In
Well,
that car.
you're
Yeah,
like
the R35
6'1",
right?
yeah.
But
It's
it's like
stiff as
if
hell.
you're 5'8", that's your car.
Yeah.
But it's
guys like you and I
But
know we
it's
don't.
easy to drive fast. I don't like personally. I don't care for the way you can see out of it. The NSX, when you sit in an NSX, is like putting a helmet on your head. You can see everything.
Yeah.
You just go like that, and you can see everything. But it was a market decision. It was Nissan's marketing decision to take an iconic brand, which I think is one of the reasons it's not called the Skyline.
Because Skyline
Even
doesn't
the
sound
Japanese
impressive.
had a bad taste in their mouth. They couldn't call it.
It wasn't right to
yeah.
call it that.
It's a GTR, which is saying, okay, moving forward, this is what our next supercars, and they get traded around like crazy now.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon to have an R35 have 10, 15 owners because it's a
Yeah.
car people buy, they play with it, and they get rid of
They
it.
get disappointed and it's out.
They're fast. I mean, they're
They're
fast.
very
and
quick. I just don't love.
Yeah, I hate I hate flappy paddles.
I
Absolutely.
mean, they're fun. Like,
I mean, I
but
could go
you
on
wouldn't
for
want-
days about the things
I would
don't,
say-
little things like I hate driving a car that sounds like the transmission's going to implode while you're driving it, and that's normal.
Yeah, that's,
That transmission is.
Gearbox.
I think anyone who owns one of those cars will tell you it's really loud, obnoxious, and it sounds like this thing's going to break, and they do break.
yes, and they're expensive
I don't know,
when they do. Right?
$20,000
Not
a
if,
transmission
when.
back in the day. I don't know what they are now. You guys can tell me if I'm wrong, but
Well, they're probably making money on volume.
But the thing
at
is,
this
all right, so
point.
it's an iconic Japanese car. The thing is, Initial D, which will segue into our next car, Initial D was the reason Skylines really, drifting became more and more popular because of Initial D.
Yeah,
The 180s and 240s and Sylvias were all from that world. 86s. But no one got to drive a GTR. Most people didn't get to drive a GTR. Spoiled rotten group.
Well, certainly in America.
Certainly in America. And then
Never
the
touched
GTR is, this whole generation, that's the only car they know.
Yeah.
2008 and beyond.
And,
GTR.
and what's funny is, that's all they had to go from.
Right.
When I used to go to events and shows and people get to go for a ride in a 34 or whatever it was, they were blown away by, this is that car's grandfather, or, and
the taillights are the same pattern.
But,
that's
but going
about
in the
it.
same direction with Initial D, people that see the FRS and the BRZ now, which is another one of those cars, or the FT86, don't realize
GT86 in
or
Europe,
GT86,
it's Toyota.
but I've never seen, because they fell apart.
The AE86.
AE86 is, God bless anybody out there who has a pristine one, because they're my
I guess
They
they're
don't
all
hero.
exist anymore.
Celicas
They don't
too.
exist.
No, they're my hero. Like, if you could keep an AE from rotting underneath the rear window,
Because John,
you're a god.
it's legendary now, but it was just a Corolla. In the
And-
same way
Yeah.
that nobody saved NA Miatas because it was just a
No,
Miata.
but if you,
now,
but if you got out of an
somewhat
R35 and got to drive an R32, most people would say, wow, this is an awesome car. It's fast, it's fun, it does a lot of crazy things. I think if you got out of an FRS and went into an old A86, you'd be like, this thing is incredibly slow.
You're touching on a point that I wanted to make before we get off of GTRs, which is that I think that the R35s as a standalone car, if they were never traced back to the 34, 33, or 32, are fine cars. They're cool, they're whatever. But following that lineage, they're a disappointment.
Well,
It's hard to live up to Dad.
I wanted to bring up that point,
You know?
that point too, because because it's not even just the Japanese. The Germans are also falling into
Yeah,
this
I did.
trap.
I had that loaded. I had it loaded.
The Germans are falling into this trap where they don't want to build a car that drives well. They just want to build a car that's fast. So you look at the E90 M3, which
Yeah.
is this wonderful V8. I think one of, if not the best sounding engine that you could ever get in a four-door
And it's
sedan.
actually very reliable.
And
shockingly.
it had some valve train issue. You'd have to.
It had valve train issues and it had rod bearing issues.
Yeah, the
but
rod
it
bearing
did have-
issue is the.
Once those were taken care of, it's just turnkey every morning.
Yeah,
Well,
so
every,
yeah, the-
every car. I mean, even if you go back to the R32s, the early cars had all kinds of crank issues and oil pump issues.
Yeah.
That if you abused the car, they'd go
That's
bad.
a different story with what's actually reliable. Like,
Sure.
what isn't reliable.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, true.
But so now this M3, which was, it was 414 horsepower, and we're like, whoa, that's like really a lot. That was a huge jump from the E46, which was what 333, which was a fairly a huge amount of power when that car was new back in 2001 or whenever it was. Now we have M3s that are making 440, but they're turbocharged, so they have all that torque to back it up. And people are going to their local tuning. They get their car, immediately throw a set of wheels on it, immediately throw a set of spacers on it, ruin all of the work that BMW did to make that car handle as well as possible, and then they slam it down and put 700 horsepower into this car that has, 255s in the rear?
Probably 265.
I think, these skinny tires, and it just overwhelms it. It's not a car for drivers anymore. It's just to go straight really quick.
Before we get totally off into your neck of the ethos, and kind of what you're saying too, is these things both going?
Yeah, I heard a beep.
That's not stopping.
Is the battery dying or
No, it is a limit.
Yeah.
It's got a timer limit on it.
Yeah, well, it breaks up the video into chunks so that they're not more than a certain amount.
So anyway, what I was saying about like the Scion, FRS and BRZ, they are way. I mean, people hate me when I say this, but they are way better than the original car as a driver's car.
The steering is still one of the best steering that you can get.
They
at
go
any
around
price.
corners. They're fun.
Their interior's kind of crappy.
In the
but you'd
used
expect it to
market,
be.
you're lucky if you can buy an old AE for what you're going to buy an FRS for.
Okay, so if both cars were released, let's say at the same time, right, and you could drive either. Let's even say they're around the same price. Obviously, the FRS is a better.
Those generational
GT86 is a better car.
sure.
But certain technologies have matured and certain things have gotten better, so you should expect that. I think the question that I would have to that statement is it much better against the current landscape of cars that are available than the AE86 was against that landscape of cars at that time?
Well, what else was available? We're talking 80s
Well,
now,
what-
right? With the AE86.
What was available? Yeah, in '85.
RX-7s.
That was
Well,
four-cylinder manual rear-wheel drive.
There was
Real
Fox body
good.
Mustangs. You could get a Mustang
That is
SVO,
a
which was
huge disappointment.
So that's what I'm saying now. The biggest problem that the FR or now it's called the Toyota 86 and the Subaru BRZ have is that they make, I think 205 I think is the most you can get out of one of those. 205 horsepower. They're about $27,000 for the same price. You can get an EcoBoost Mustang, which has 310 horsepower, or you can get a 4-cylinder Camaro, which I think still has 200 and something.
But the RS is how much?
I think the Camaro does it a little differently. Camaro did it 4-cylinder, V6, V8. Ford, when they still sold the V6, they don't sell the V6 anymore, was V6 EcoBoost V8. So it was a little different. So the base Camaro engine is a 4-cylinder. I think it's 250. It's still 50 more horsepower and a turbo, and it can be tuned.
But do you think
I don't know if we can fact check how much horsepower a new 4-cylinder Camaro has. That's one, because I know the V6 is somewhere at low 300s. I think 310.
But here's the thing: do you really want to try to compare Mustangs and Camaros overall to an FRS? An FRS,
I mean,
will handle circles around.
They're very different cars.
275.
275.
So you get 207. That's like 70
You know
more
what the
horsepower.
weird part of being probably the oldest guy sitting here is? There was a point where I was literally like, they're making up these horsepower numbers.
Yeah.
Is there a special dyno
doing this
for
Japanese
generation?
So, John, have you driven
False.
any of the Alpha platform cars that GM has? So that's the Camaro, the ATS, the CTS, They are
I've driven the CTS-V with the new body style.
the supercharged. So
That car is
so,
excellent.
It is.
So that is the same basic chassis that underpins the Camaro, and it is so good.
If somebody tried to hand me one of those cars as a rental car, I'd get something else. But
Well, the Cadillac has interior problems.
no, I don't mean
too,
the Cadillac. I
and
mean the
things like
Camaro
that.
and the Mustang. I mean, the V6 Mustang. Or
Well, that's just
the
because it's
world's
a-
international rental car.
That's just because it's a connotation of, okay, I'm going on vacation and I want to rent something rear-wheel drive, sporty, two-door that's different than the Camry that I have at home. And why would why would the rental car fleet buy a 86 or
Well, they
a
wouldn't. They
BRZ?
just wouldn't.
Because that doesn't have a usable back seat. It has a much smaller trunk than the Mustang. So just because they're better as cars and they happen to be rented out doesn't mean that they're worse cars.
No,
It's
but-
because the Mustang and Camaro are better than they have ever been in the past. Even in their base forms, they're not nearly as good as the
rental
V8
car
ones.
companies tend to go for the things that they're not going to have to fix.
Well, I think.
You know,
Well, I
that's
think.
it.
I think
Maybe
we're.
the wheels driven off them.
I think, kind of to your original question, FRS's Mustangs and Camaros are not in the same market. They're just not.
They're in the same price.
They're in the same price
They-
range, but
they
they're
do
not.
different-
They don't appeal to the same demographic.
They do different. But if I was spending $27,000 on a sports
Like if you
coupe,
just yeah.
if I just had a budget of $27,000 and I had to look,
I just don't think of a Mustang. I think it's sports coupe.
but the
You know what it is.
EcoBoost Mustang is a sweet little car, especially if you get the performance pack.
It is.
It doesn't steer as well as the FRS, but it does. It depends on if you live in Los Angeles, you can take advantage of Angeles Crest Highway
Yeah.
all the time. Absolutely, get a Miata, get an '86. If you live where we
Don't try to
do,
catch me in a Porsche and Infinity.
well, those, yeah. So he's doing an inside joke where I had to try and chase him in a 911, and I was in a QX30. Very different.
Fair fight.
Didn't work out
Fair
very
fight.
well.
That's a fair
But
fight.
so what I'm saying with the Mustang is if you're living where we are, which is Florida, where all the roads are straight, and then you can go right or left, like at 90-degree angles exclusively.
Yeah.
You know,
Unless you go on
310
one of our
horsepower is more enjoyable day
Well,
to
no,
day
absolutely.
than 200 and fun steering where there's no turns.
All right,
I'm
So-
certain I
so
would have
let's-
more fun going down a canyon road in an FRS than either a Camaro or a Mustang.
So let's
The Camaro's close because of that Alpha platform.
Let's
is
take a
so
minute
good.
and let Jason drool a little bit. So we've covered a lot of the import stuff, the domestic stuff. They've been replicating Camaros and Mustangs so much that it's not even worth talking about. They've been making the car. You'd have to go on for an hour about just that pony cars,
Yeah.
and maybe we'll talk about that another time.
Yeah.
But, M cars. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Not getting into the Mercedes end of it because the
Yeah,
Mercedes
it's a
end
whole
of it
different
is,
end of the
you know, you and I both love the weird AMG SEC cars that no one likes.
Yeah.
But the
Hammers and such. Yeah.
So we're talking
Dude,
about
that's
M cars.
literally my favorite part of Roadhouse.
oh,
Is that
it
500
has a
SEC? I love that.
SEC, yeah.
But anyway, M cars. So we talked about this a while back about how, you know, when I was into Porsches, my Porsche mechanic would always have a bunch of E30 M3s out back broken that their owners didn't want to spend the money to fix because they were the four-cylinder BMW no one liked.
Yeah,
was this
and now
when? Sorry.
the E30 M3 is
This is-
now
This
ridiculously
is early
expensive.
90s.
So this is when the E30 M3 was just a generation old car.
Right, when, you know, when
Yeah, and it was the
both
four-cylinder
my
one.
944s were late 80s cars. So they were,
Yeah.
this was in the 90s.
Yeah.
But
Just think about it. The E36 came out, and it was so much more powerful. It was bigger.
If somebody
and it-
knows what this story was, I want to say it was Motor Trend or Car and Driver, one of those magazines back in the day. They literally said it was the biggest disappointment ever to come out of BMW because it was this four-cylinder.
So look,
M car.
here's if we're gonna have this conversation, I just got to make sure we're all on the same page about a couple of things. So the E30 M3 only existed as a
Homologation.
car. It was a homologation special. The only reason it came with a four-cylinder is because that's what the DTM rules were at the time. It's the same reason as the Mercedes 2.316 valve, you know, the Kazi had. Like it had to be four-cylinder. They had to sell it to the car, so it had to come with a four-cylinder.
But the industry,
I don't think
the industry condemned it wrongfully, I think.
Well, where I was going to go with that is, in other words, like BMW didn't go, hey, here's this extremely well-handling car. Let's
Slow it down.
hamstring it with a four-cylinder. No, that's the thing they had to do
Yeah.
to fit the rules. Now, I think if BMW at the time had free reign to just do whatever with it and just make whatever with it, I don't think it would have come with a four-cylinder.
Well,
Yeah.
then the
No, I don't
then the
think so.
E36 came out, and the problem that we had was Europe got this 320 horsepower, beautiful S50 motor,
Yeah.
and we got the S52, which was 240 horsepower.
Well, we had the S50 US before
the S50 US, which
Yeah.
was just it was just a dreadful. And
Well, yeah, it's
did you know? Because I know E46 values are on the rise. And E30 values are already beyond.
I happen to have
reason.
one M3 of both, so.
Did you know that E36 M3 prices are actually
I
going
have-
up right now? I don't
and
know
actually-
why.
And actually, while we're on that topic,
They're
I
not
really,
cars.
really don't know why. Because, so I have an E30 M3. I have an E46 M3.
Yeah.
I purposely don't have an E36 M3
They're not
because
good.
it was a bitter disappointment
I
in the car.
like the car.
I agree.
It's just
I have one.
yeah.
I wouldn't own one.
I
Like,
just
I would
don't-
literally own I would go out of my way to say I'm going to own every generation M3, and then I would just be like, nah, don't need that. Like,
Yeah, well, and so what it is like everything that made the M3 different from the regular E30 and cool,
Yeah.
they didn't do for the E36.
Yeah.
So it has the same bodywork, the same interior, the same. It's mostly the same car.
I don't
Only
think-
the engine's
Didn't
different.
I don't think the
didn't we
steering's
have a
that great
conversation
either.
recently about how Mercedes, all the interiors are the same.
It
no
wasn't
matter
with
what the
me,
model
but
is.
I probably would agree.
Yeah, I mean, it's like no matter what model it is, the interior kind of looks the same.
More
Well,
like
that's
the
just
homogeneous design.
Well, all
which-
these new
GM's
cars,
different.
the new 7 looks like a
But,
small.
interestingly-
but here's a
5.
question that I want to ask you.
Yeah,
and see
yeah.
what your take is on this.
Yeah, the original question was what's going on with the M division?
Well, true, but successor not being as good as the pet.
Well, they're losing their drivers.
In the case of the M3, the E30 cars,
yeah.
I think the cars got generic from that point.
They did. They
that
did.
car looks amazing,
Yeah.
and that's where the cool ends.
That's where it is. Yeah.
and that's
yeah.
why you see so many of them with different motors in them, and
Yeah.
everything from 10 cylinders.
Mine
all
has
over the place.
an E39 and 5V8 in it. So.
So I mean, but
wow.
without
Yeah.
getting into resto modding, because I've seen A86s
Yeah.
with 2Js and and 4AGs and all these engine swaps trying to make them better all
Yeah,
the time.
yeah.
But I think what skyrocketed the value, and we'll get the last thing I wanted to talk about is values, which is your strong point.
Yeah.
Yeah, these values.
Do you think that BMWs have gotten better, M cars have gotten better as cars, but lost their look?
So here's the difficulty that you have in answering that
So I
question.
think that's the net problem with all of these cars. I think they've gotten
Well, I
less
agree.
attractive over time.
I think the problem with answering that question directly is what makes a car better to guys like us is not what makes a car better to the people buying it.
Yes,
For the most part.
The new
So-
M5 doesn't have a manual.
Right.
It's an automatic only.
Right.
It's all-wheel drive
Which-
because
which
that helps you
which
launch
in
harder.
fairness is almost every car now.
So
Well,
yeah.
no,
They're not drivers' cars anymore.
They're not drivers'
I
cars.
think the last true driving M5 was the E39. It was manual only.
E60 was pretty good.
The E60 was
pretty good.
That's what I was about to get to.
Yeah.
I was going to say the E30 was close because the E30 was still a very nice driving car with
E30.
great. The E60
No.
M5 was still one of the best driving cars, and it's like the thing that BMW had over Mercedes or Audi was that all of their cars just drove like sports cars, and
So-
the Audis and the Mercedes were big, heavy, sloppy messes.
I explained
and
this-
now everybody's caught up.
I explain this to people in this very simple term, right? Mercedes and Audi and BMW, they're all sport luxury cars. The difference is that the needle is more towards sports for BMW
Yeah.
and more towards luxury for Audi and Mercedes for forever.
Yeah, for always.
For forever.
Audis would always understeer. Mercedes would always hideously
Yeah.
oversteer.
Yeah.
I mean, and leaving Mercedes out of the ballpark. There's two cars one car that we really haven't talked about,
Yeah.
and I'm not even going to get into why, but the Supra we don't have anything to compare it to yet.
Yeah.
Okay. Unfortunately, we do have something to compare the RX-7 to. The RX-7, whether you love rotaries or hate rotaries, or
You're going to say the RX-8.
in my opinion, where cars, I like cars that actually run every day.
Yeah.
The disaster that was the RX-8.
The first RX-7s, I still have a soft spot for those cars.
Yeah.
The FCs, okay, for that generation, they weren't bad. The FD is a beautiful
Yeah,
car.
yeah.
Stunning.
That's
It
a car
is
that got better. as
stunning.
it got-
It got
Yes,
it
stunning
got
looking
better.
car, the
Now,
RX-7.
if you have a friend who has a room full of 22B motors or
if you parked it in the factory or it was built, like maybe
you own stock in the Apex Seal manufacturer.
Yeah.
They're great. They're still not reliable, but I think I have a tainted opinion owning an NSX, but I think the NSX is the most beautiful car to ever come out of Japan, or at least one of them.
Yeah.
And the FD is probably right next to it. Now, the RX-7, I've had a few FDs. I've had Japanese ones and American ones, and the quality of the car is lacking a little bit, just like that whole like the door handles come off in your hand, and little dumb things like the way the door is shaped.
All Japanese cars are reliable.
Yeah.
All of them. What are you talking about?
And don't get me wrong. For the amount of cars they built and how awesome they look, I'm nitpicking.
Yeah.
The fact that you're more likely to see one on a lift than on the street is a different story.
Irrelevant to this point.
But I think the biggest travesty of all the cars that's ever been replaced was trying to replace an RX-7 with an RX-8.
Well, they did it so late. It was not even in the same power class.
Their build quality. We had one that we drove it for like a month. We had a yellow Sport, and I literally had to drive it with the scan tool plugged into the car all the time to constantly clear some kind of weird code. The gear shift knob came off in my hand. The build, it was just horrible.
So you'd asked me before, and I don't know if I really answered it, but you asked me before what happened to like the M division, and so I think the easiest way to answer that, and that's relevant to what we're about to discuss, is BMW as a company quite publicly stopped caring about making driver's cars, and they started caring too much about just making money. And they were always making money.
Active tour.
Right. But they were always making money, so it's not like they were going broke and they had to make some decision. They just chose to get greedy.
You can't fault a company for wanting to make money.
But if you think about it, for how many decades they were able to just make the cars they wanted.
But
Porsche too, same thing.
But here's my thing.
Able to make. Well, they almost went bankrupt.
Nissan,
and then they got bought by
Nissan never sat there and said, we are a performance car company.
Yeah.
Well, they're saying now we are a CVT crap company.
Acura never said that. There's a lot of companies that never said, we're about sports cars.
But BMW did say that.
The
BMW was the
driver.
I just don't think they're the drivers' cars.
A lot of these cars have betrayed their predecessors.
Yeah.
BMW, for one, has betrayed
its entire division.
Their whole reputation.
Yeah, the entire thing.
Well, they're saying that we're the ultimate driving machine if you want a grocery getter.
The ultimate driving machine that can park itself.
Yeah.
So tell me, what is the best? I know it's still called the 3 Series class, but I don't think it leads the class. What do you think is the best driving car in that segment? The compact luxury sports sedan
the M2
segment. No, that's not. That doesn't count.
You want to sit there like
I want a car that competes against the M3.
We're getting a little off topic. We're getting into sedan.
All right, so the RX-8. Sorry. So the RX-8. Yeah. I remember.
It's the Julia, by the way. Is what I wanted them to say.
And then I threw up in my hands.
I've always been into European cars. For a small while, I had Japanese cars, but growing up in the early 2000s and in the early 2010s, and kind of becoming a teenager and becoming an adult and having money to buy cars, when the RX-8 was announced, I was incredibly excited because the FD was such a cool car.
I still like that car.
It was the FD was such a cool car, And I was like, oh, now they're finally gonna.
Now I can own the new.
They're making an RX-8.
I didn't have a problem with the way it looked. I kind of thought it was.
I thought it looked like terrible.
It looked like.
I
looked like
I know some people
looked like a squid. It looked like a squid,
Well, didn't all Mazdas shortly?
I liked the suicide doors in the back.
I hated them. I was like, there's too many doors. It looks like crap. It looks like a fish. I didn't like it at all. And then every Mazda.
Everything was a triangle on the inside.
It's just the design language is
uninspired to me. A lot of companies do that now. Lexus, everything has the same grill.
Well, and I was prepared to go, not all good cars look good, right? So maybe it's fast. It's not. Maybe it handles really well. So
maybe
overall,
it's economical.
No, I knew it wasn't going to be when they said it was going to have a rotary in it. I knew it wasn't going to be economical. Yeah. But you know what I mean? Like
I met a guy a few years ago that was on his 5th factory replacement.
Yeah, that's the big problem.
And so
is that
that's
you
the
just
thing,
go through
right?
motors. I've heard though that like in other markets like the UK that just isn't a problem.
Different oil, different gas.
I can't confirm or deny that, but
cars
like
are kept in better condition.
different oil, different gas.
Cars are maintained a lot better.
I've just heard that in other markets beside our own,
So-
the RX-8 is not a horrible
A car. Well, so for me, having driven, and it only took one for me to make come to this conclusion.
Yeah.
I drove the car, and I'm like, it's not better than the outgoing car, the RX-7, in any way. It's not better at all, because I was kind of really crazy
I think
car
Mazda would
electronics.
disagree with you because it fit more people. They were trying to make a sports car with back seats.
How much was
Isn't
the
that the
RX-8
point?
when it was new, and how much was the
I
RX?
have
Because
no
the RX-7 was significantly more expensive.
Well, it was a much more purpose-built sports car.
Well, there was no Supra when the RX-8 came out. There was no 3000 or 300ZX.
I think the RX-8 was Mazda's FRS.
Well, I don't
think it was their attempt to just take over.
No, I think it was their
Well-
failure.
Well, no,
Well,
it's the same failure
think-
on a worse level. But
I
I think they want. Hey, we don't have anything to compete against. There's no NSX. There's no car with the
They had the
Japanese
Miata.
God car.
They had the Mazda Speed
Yeah, but
Miata.
The Japanese,
Which was a great
Miata is
car.
not a God car when it comes to the Japanese car.
I think that
It's a good
they didn't
car.
have any competition in the segment.
the mistake might have been on the part of people like myself or anybody out there who has the same opinion in assuming that it was going to be a replacement for the RX-7, and I don't know if Mazda ever intended it to be. I don't think.
In foreshadowing, I'm going to say right now, I don't think anyone should think the new Supra is going to do that.
No.
Yeah,
You know what
yeah,
the Supra
yeah.
is going to be? A BMW. So if you want one of those, just go buy a
Go buy
used
BMW.
335i.
It'll last longer, probably.
What's
So you think there's anything we haven't covered so that as far as iconic cars?
I was going to
that
ask
were
what
bitter
our next topic
disappointments.
is. I was going to say.
Well, I mean,
Well,
I think we've covered.
I think we've gone through
I can
that.
say-
So I have one more vehicle I want to drop in the equation
well, I will say that
because
in the same
we've kept off it.
in the same way as BMW's M Division has now just become the most expensive whatever, but not necessarily the best
it's kind
whatever.
of like AMG. Let's throw it back
That's
on
exactly
everything.
what I was going to say. Is that
You wrote a
AMG's
blog
done
about
this?
it.
I did.
But I
Right.
like that because Mercedes was never about precision and being the best.
Actually, if you go far enough back in Mercedes' history,
What an AMG
They-
was before Mercedes owned it.
no. Well, yeah, but Mercedes did make proper sports cars. They just
they made the
stopped doing it.
they made the the 190 Cosworth. and
Further
things like
back. Further back.
that. Okay, so we're going way.
I'm going
but,
60s, 70s.
but
they
that
made-
was long before the BMW M division existed.
Let's hit the
not really.
The M division was in the 80s. was
Well,
their
the first
car.
M Division car
M1.
was the 79 M1.
Yeah.
70s.
Oh, I guess you're right.
But the 3.0.
Well, now you got me drooling.
But
and then the
3.0
E30 M3 and the E20
the
M5.
3.0 CSI, which was the car. You know,
that was
that was-
yeah,
there you
yeah.
go.
The M1. The reason I bought my
I
850
love
is because it
M1s.
looked like an M1 from the front.
if
It was
I-
a pop-up dimmer.
If I were not a poor man, I would buy an M1.
So all right, so we've touched on the domestic end of it a little, but
Domestic disappointments, or
Oh, the 4 GT.
the 4GT. So
Oh.
now I recently got to I recently
Hate
got
it.
to go
I'm so-
I recently got to go to
I'm curious to hear why I hate.
a
Hate it.
museum in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
The Simeon Foundation's museum, and if you guys get a chance to go and see their stuff, they have 5 cars parked in a horseshoe that are worth over $100 million, just those 5 cars. And it, hint, Aston Martin DBR1 of 3. But that's just scratching the surface of that collection. But they had a GTX code original GT40, and they had a Mark IV that was the stretched wheelbase car that was to race. I believe it was a Le Mans car.
Yeah.
I don't think you can have a clearer separation of all these other cars never won Le Mans.
All right, so here's where the disconnect
Like
comes
with
in.
their I mean, no, I don't care how much money Henry Ford spent to win Le Mans. I mean, it was millions of dollars upon millions of dollars.
Because he had to R&D a car like immediately.
Well, I'm gonna
Yeah.
go on a rant now because for me buying a car, of all of the things that impact me when I'm buying a car,
So
how it does as a race car is literally
hold on. What's up?
not.
There's a cop out there that wants to buy the Prelude. He said if you have it tomorrow, he'll come give you $1,500 for it tomorrow.
Yay! Car sale.
$1,500.
That's my friend's sister wants to just sell her.
Oh,
she got a
okay.
new car.
Is that camera still going?
No, that one's got the lens shut.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Okay.
All right.
All right. So let's go back to this. We haven't really talked about the Ford GT40. So let's talk about
All right.
I went and saw one in a
All right.
museum. There was a few of them there.
I'm gonna
Cool
go on a
stuff.
rant because
Before you go to rant,
Before domestic
hate
ones,
the
right?
Ford GT.
So do you want to talk about the 2000s era GT as it replaced the GT40? Because I don't really think it was a replacement.
the reason
it was,
I-
it was an homage to
So the reason I want
that car.
I love that car.
the reason
Yeah,
I want
love
to
it.
use this as the conclusion car,
Yeah.
is because it's kind of a three-phase where the other cars really didn't have a three-phase.
Right.
So you had a bite your tongue. You're gonna be okay.
My tongue's
You had a
bleeding.
Le Mans winning race car.
Correct.
Then they built a few street versions of it.
Correct.
I don't know how many.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
But
But
you could buy it.
Right, and I've
Yeah.
been lucky enough to see I think 2 Mark IVs
Yeah,
now. I
they're-
think that still makes me drool.
Millions
Yeah.
of dollars.
And then they made basically a modernization of the original race car.
Yeah.
They made the best road car that was possible to make at the time.
I actually really liked the 2000s era.
Which was a
GT.
manual transmission, as wide of tires that would fit
And
on it, a
mid-engine.
mid-engine,
And
the
they
most
did,
powerful
and-
supercharged
and,
motor.
And I'm going to give Ford credit for the fact that I think out of everything,
Yeah.
they worked the hardest on keeping the legend when they built a new car.
As-
It looks like the old
Went
one.
down to the 100 in the headlights. That
As-
most people know that it says 100 in the headlights for 100 years of Ford. Or I mean,
As an homage to the GT40 and as a driver's car,
It
I
worked.
think they knocked it out of the park. It's an awesome, awesome car.
and I really got miffed about people that talked it down. Clarkson had a lot of negative things.
But he bought
He
one.
bought one.
He
No,
bought
he
one.
liked it. He owned
I thought he
it.
didn't like it.
No, well, he had problems with his.
Yeah, he
his,
talked-
his had like a million.
He talked badly about it after he sold it.
So-
but he loved it
so-
before
is
that.
it rant time yet?
Yeah. So they built the new car, and then I think when you and I had met for the first time, one of the first subjects we talked about was the value of that car and what it was going to do.
The
400
newer-
grand,
the
and
newer
since it's
GT?
limited,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
obviously going to go up, as
Uh,
everything does. If the press release says there's 200 and they're all sold out, it means that guess what? They're instantly already worth more than
Yeah.
whatever.
MSRP,
I do a lot of press release write-ups.
How low did the second iteration go? I mean, it went down to a point where they were like 100 grand, right?
Yeah, you could get a Ford
That was
GT.
the
There were
cheapest they were.
there
But
were
you
like
can't buy
crash
one now
damage
for
ones that
No,
were
no.
Yeah.
I was in
Yeah,
the bottom.
no one
before the-
wanted a 2005, 2007. Nobody wanted that Ford GT. It was just like,
You
oh,
used to,
you know.
all right, so
I think that car actually was one of the quickest ones to go up in value
Sure,
of like all
sure.
modern cars.
But it's also
For a lot,
appreciate.
But
for a lot of no. Now the new ones are doing it before they even get delivered.
Okay,
so
but
that's
that doesn't count
faster.
though. That
Well,
doesn't
wait,
count.
wait,
That
wait,
doesn't
wait.
count.
So the
But I think they're doing that because the second cars were so successful in doing it. I mean, the original car, we're talking
I wasn't
millions of
talking about
dollars.
GTs,
Yeah.
but
We're
I
talking
was
about millions of dollars.
the second iteration of the Ford GT, which is the 2005 to I think 2007 car. They were 150 when they were new. Ford dealerships sold them initially. They had because it was this big new thing or whatever. And then by the time the production run was ending in 2007, dealerships were sitting on them, and they didn't have they were sitting.
Well,
in
the economy was crashing. then,
Yeah, the
too.
economy was
So-
crashing. Nobody really wanted them. The cars tanked in value, so they were never worth more
But
than the 150
But
that people paid for
still
them.
not that tanked.
No, they didn't tank, but they were 100 grand. I think
And they need
I
some-
remember seeing some for like 80 to
Yeah, I was
89,
gonna say, I
but maybe in the
remember-
90s.
and
now they're
And
400,000.
now I think, so here's another thing. And
3 to 400,000.
You guys can tell me what you think. I think the reason they did that and the reason they went up is because when you're making the new car almost a modernization, exact replica of the vintage car, it has nowhere to go but up. It's a good, if they built an NSX that looked and had the same kind of perspective as the original
What was
car,
modernized? Yeah.
I think people would have loved it more.
So you're saying that you think there's something to that specific
I
formula?
think the closer you stay to the original formula,
Yeah.
the better it's going to end.
I think the problem is that when you try to make a car that is completely of its time, it gets dated. when is the last time you picked up a cell phone from 2010
that's a very good
and
point.
was like, oh wow, it's amazing? No, because it's horrible.
Yeah, that's a very
8
good
years
point.
later.
But
In the same way that it's because the Ford GT wasn't, oh, it's F1, because that's what's the best
But
right now.
wait,
It wasn't twin turbo because that's the best right now.
That's actually a
and
good
it wasn't
But
8-way traction
But I don't
control,
look at
which
my
is what
phone
Ferrari was doing all
ever
the
and
time.
go, that is one sexy bitch.
Well, that's why I don't think the
Yeah.
Enzo is a very good car. I don't think that aged well at all
No.
because it was the best of technology in 2003.
Well,
and
Ferrari is a different.
I think it's
topic for
rant
a
time.
different day.
I think it's rant time
But
about
wait,
the
let's,
new
let's,
GT.
let's just talk about the new one, then you can have at it. So
Yeah.
the new car, a lot of people are like, oh, they're never going to get 400,000 for these.
Oh, they're
cars.
getting it.
No, I never
Well,
thought
no,
that
no,
they
no, no,
wouldn't get it.
I know.
I knew that they
They're
would get
getting
it.
You and I were pretty much on the same page to that. But I was like, watch these suckers sell.
Oh,
Because the old one was 150, but now there's
but
more
now-
rich people
but
now than
now-
there was in
Well, and the,
2005.
now
and the
you
dollar
have a
isn't as strong as
modern-
it was then
Yeah.
either.
But
so
now you have a car that's
spend more to get less.
still, and you're going to probably disagree with me, still has a lot of the same design cues. as
Oh, it's
the
beautiful. It's a beautiful looking car. I
There's
can't
familiar
deny it. The
design
buttresses,
It
very
goes,
cool.
You
It's neat looking.
When you look at certain cars and think there's something else, that's the problem.
I'm actually curious to hear what your rant is about the new GT because I think objectively as a European car guy,
Hold on, here it comes.
as a European car guy, objectively, like I have no dog in this fight.
Yeah.
I think they're really cool cars. I think they look good.
Let's start. Here's where the rant starts. The buying process. I have to.
It's the Ferrari process.
I have to stand in front of the camera and I have to say I have owned Fords in the past and I have this
Or you
social.
could be Jay Leno and somebody will do it.
Yeah,
for you.
and the Ford show
And it will
car, the
come
car,
in
the car
4K.
shows up on your
Jay's
door.
awesome.
The car shows up on your doorstep when you're Jay Leno. He didn't. I guarantee you, he did
They were
not
probably
apply.
like, "Oop, Jay, what color you want?"
Yeah.
So you had to apply for this car.
It's
So
like,
that
how many can I have?
It pissed off the people who couldn't get one.
Yeah.
And now the people who do have them aren't allowed to sell them because they had this stupid
Agreement.
contract
Yeah.
with Ford.
they tried that with the LFA. They tried that. They were going to make the LFA like that. You couldn't
Yeah.
resell it.
Do you
So-
know why
They
that all
listen
came
Well,
to be?
they
Actually,
they should have
speculated,
they should have
drive
they
it
should
to the
have
roof.
people. You actually, this is a car you'll be familiar with. When the new GT3 RSs and like all the new super exclusive
Yeah.
Porsches came out,
yeah
people who could afford to would buy several.
yeah
To
flip 'em.
buy the stock
Speculate.
out.
They were
and then
180
sell them
new,
for
250
more.
with options.
Correct.
They were getting
And
350
Porsche
for 'em.
lost their minds about it. So then it kind of filtered to the rest of the
that
industry.
that
You
goes
can't
in that
control
goes
the market.
that
People
goes into my
always find
different.
a way
They
to
still
You
make it.
try.
can. You can. You know what you can say? You can say, oh, 911R is $1 million. Well, here's a GT3 Touring that's almost the exact same thing, and that's gonna, So what I think limited edition cars are stupid. I think saying that, oh, we're gonna make 50 of them and that's it.
That's how you know it's
is
a rant.
is dumb. Like, make as many as you can sell. Supply, and then the other part, demand.
But
If there's
but-
demand, you make more cars,
but
you make more
Ford-
money.
But Ford doesn't care.
So all right, so Ford doesn't care about that. So Ford
A
made
lot of
people
companies
apply.
don't.
Yeah.
And the people and the reason why they did this application was because they wanted people who were going to drive it, who were going to put it on social media. How many Ford GTs you've seen driving around,
I know.
being shown off
Oh,
and displayed?
Well, yeah.
all that and
yeah.
used as a car. I've seen one. Ian
yeah.
Poulter
I've seen 3
uses
and one
his.
was at SEMA.
Okay, so Ian Poulter uses his, but he has 1 million cars, so he's not really going to get to drive it. So the whole reason they did it was so that they'd be driven and whatever, they'd not be speculated and have 0 miles on it, because that's sad. It's a race car. You want to see it be used and
Yeah.
whatever. But it costs so much money that
But
people are
from-
hesitant to drive
From a
it.
marketing point of view, it's a great move, though. Because
I mean,
you
we
generate
talked
all
about
this
so
hype
yeah,
and exclusivity.
so we talked about it, whatever.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So then the car actually comes out, and it's 600 and I think it's 650 horsepower or whatever.
Yeah.
There's other cars now that are like I'm going to say the McLaren 720S, which I think is the best car in the world right now, because
Uh-oh.
it's
We're
faster.
agreeing on
It is faster than the Ford GT around a racetrack. It is far more comfortable. You can actually buy one.
What's the price on it?
Low threes, so about 100.
Slightly less.
So
With
100.
a lot
100
less prestige.
But you can buy. Oh no!
An
So
exclusivity.
that's only considering what the Ford GT's actual price was.
Yeah.
What is
Yeah.
the value of it now
Who
that they're
knows?
being delivered? One sold at Mecum, I think, for
See,
almost $1 million. And I
you-
think maybe it did sell for $1
But
million.
you and I,
Mecum had one.
You know that McLaren right now is my favorite car company, and And the reason is
That's
because,
interesting to hear.
Well, it is because I think they give 2 cents about their customer.
Oh yeah,
And,
yeah.
And I love the fact that they're treating the manufacturer of automobiles like they treat Formula One, which is, oh, we're gonna make a new car tomorrow. You know,
Yeah,
and-
Yeah, you're done.
and-
Like
and-
we're already
and
making another one.
collectors, the same people
Yeah.
that love what you're hating
Yeah,
about the
yeah.
GT40, they hate McLarens. Oh my God, I bought this McLaren for $200,000 and it's selling for $150,000
Good for people
now.
like us.
And I'm like, and I giggle like a kid because I'm thinking at some point 12Cs are going to drop under 100 grand. And I'm
They
damn
will.
well buying
They
them.
will.
So
Our
here's-
first generation R8s are already on.
So
there.
here's
If you watch a lot of YouTube videos now, and I've watched a few lately, where these guys that go out and not like the guys that are like we talk about all the time, the high end. So there are so many videos of guys buying 12Cs now for like $130,000, $140,000, and they're like, I got this car, and I took it to McLaren, and they looked over the whole car, and they gave me a warranty. I bought a warranty, and
on a used car.
on a used car,
Yeah.
and this thing is fun and it's fast and
It's still very impressive. Yeah.
You know, we joked about it the one time about how they're the platypus of supercars looks
Yeah,
wise.
yeah.
But you know, they're
Well, I wasn't considering the new NSX.
when was the P1 built? What was the
2014, 13,
All
I
right, so
think.
2014. In 4 years,
They already have a 720S
they have
that's
a
faster.
mid-range model, which isn't their elite model.
Yeah.
Mid-range model.
Well, the Senna is their elite model now.
True,
I think
but they have a mid-range model
That's
that is
faster than
half
that.
a second slower than a P1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was mind-numbingly
And
fast when it came out.
costs what?
Way a
third the price?
yeah. So here's my big problem.
Well, before we
We're
get
getting back to the
For
GT.
GT.
Before
That's
we-
what I was going to get back to is that I don't give when I look at the criteria for myself when buying a car, how fast it is, how good the steering is, how good it looks, everything like that. How well it does as a race car never crosses my mind
Well-
because it doesn't matter.
You think
When
it's
when
normal?
Honda was developing the NSX to be this amazing sports car, and you agree it was good because you bought a NSX, they were terrible in Formula One. They were horrible. It doesn't matter. When
Well,
Ferrari is building
the
good
new
road
one,
cars,
yeah. Back then,
Ferrari
the
is
old
building great. I know I don't really love Ferraris at the moment, but they're building very, very good road cars that are very reliable and people really like them. They're
For-
not
for-
winning in
for-
Formula
for
One. right now.
Ferraris.
Yes, for Ferraris,
Well,
and
wait,
they
wait,
are
you're
not
talking-
winning
you're
in
talking
Formula
about
One
the
right now.
Old NSX was the top of the food chain of Formula One back then. You're talking about when Senna was driving
Yeah, 80s.
Hondas.
Yeah, but before that they weren't. They went through some dark ages.
Well,
on
yeah,
them.
but the new car they're definitely.
But I still see your point.
the
But your point is
connection-
that you
the
don't buy a
connection
car based on how
doesn't
well
matter.
the racing division.
Yeah,
is
it doesn't.
doing.
It doesn't matter to me how well the racing division does. So
so-
you're buying this Ford GT, which is it's so good in Le Mans and whatever. It's so stiff as a road car. Like you're not buying it. Like if you're gonna go track your
If you're gonna buy a two
$400,000 car,
race, it's one story.
I
But,
don't.
like,
I just don't understand.
So-
you could
so
buy a
for-
cup car. You
for
can
another-
buy
for
a
another-
spec
For
Miata.
another
You
subject,
can buy
another conversation about supercars, which we'll get into another time. So, does it matter to you? Let's say you're looking at a new, sports car. Let's say, like we're talking about today, reproductions of an original classic kind of thing. Do you care about Nürburgring numbers?
I don't personally care about Nürburgring lap.
But don't you think it adds
Um,
to the prestige?
It's a good selling tool, like 0 to 60, but in the real world, how fast a car laps the Nürburgring doesn't matter at all.
So I have a very I have like a very Italian or German feeling about cars. It can be the fastest car around the Nürburgring. It can have the most horsepower. It can have all these things, whatever. If I don't get in the car and like how it feels, I don't care. I
Exactly.
don't care about any of that. So like if it doesn't do certain things for me, none of that. None of
you're
it.
And I think the
talking about
GT sounds
statistics.
bad.
But
I don't think it sounds good.
the Nürburgring lap time might attract my attention to it. So I guess
I think-
initially it matters.
But all right. So the Nürburgring,
It's become a standard though, hasn't it?
it has.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: you look at where, say, a car like we talked about earlier, the LFA,
Yeah.
rates even now on the Nürburgring, and then you look at all the other cars and you realize that the LFA did it on the street tires.
Yeah. Years ago.
There's always ways to play with the numbers.
Sure.
If you ever want to watch a car go around the Nürburgring, everybody should watch a YouTube video about the rough CTR on the Nürburgring.
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
Because
many,
I'll tell
many
you right
times.
now,
Shitty tires. That thing was. Scary.
anybody sitting here was not going that fast. That guy had that car full blown sideways. Like, it was amazing.
Yeah.
But you want to see a guy drive the wheels off a car, that's a great video.
Yeah, it's an excellent video.
But I
Watch
think,
it.
I think
And I'd
cars-
rather have a car that pushes me, not the other way around.
Well, yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't
We-
want a
we-
car that's
we-
just so beyond capable.
we're-
And the GT is just, it doesn't sound that good. I know it's pretty cool. And like,
That's-
What's a V6 in the
but
end?
that's the
so.
yeah,
problem.
there's other cars that I
That's
think
another-
can do it
that's
better
another
for
problem.
half the
new
price.
So I'm glad you brought this up because I actually forgot about this. The sound of a car matters to guys like us.
It is imperative
Okay.
that
It sounds good.
if I'm
Else
going
I
to
won't
own it
buy
for a long period of time.
The NS,
It's the thing I
new-
hated about my NC Miata.
Now, you go into, you look at my generation, I have the first year NSX. The new NSX,
Doesn't sound like
I have yet to hear a good sounding one, okay? Because,
Sounds
well,
like
the
an-
turbos are going to muffle stuff, I get it. It's
Yeah,
a hybrid,
they are
but
mufflers,
They
technically,
don't,
technically.
I don't think they sound good. The GTR
horrible sound.
is,
The M3.
what I
It's like
find
a vacuum
hilarious
cleaner.
is the only people that really seem to love the way they sound are guys that own them. Like
Yeah,
they love
it's-
them.
You know what it is, John? You know what it is? It's the same thing with M3 owners. It's because they're hearing something different than what you're hearing.
Well-
they're hearing sound through the speakers, and you, as the bystander, are
Yeah.
only hearing the shit
No,
exhaust.
true.
Yeah.
it's coming
Well,
out of
and
it.
I will say this actually, the thing I dislike the most about my E46 M3 is the exhaust note. It's like there's nothing
Oh, I
you
like
can
the
do.
S54.
No,
So-
it's awful.
so-
There's
so-
nothing you can do to make it not sound tinny and raspy.
It's better than an
So
S55
let's- so
or
you were
and,
saying-
the new one.
You were saying
the newest BMW.
Well, yeah, but
engine.
that wasn't. You couldn't compare it to that at the time. It wasn't out yet.
But
Yeah.
so
we're
compared to
gonna
the
talk
console,
about that as we're getting off track. But like the GT40, I agree with him. I don't think it sounds.
It doesn't
anywhere
sound-
close
no.
to that Whipple Charger sound
And-
that the mid car has.
and I
the
think
first
more-
car sounded like a full blown race car.
I think more importantly, it
'Cause it
doesn't
was.
sound like $400,000 either.
No.
And if I spend $400,000, I don't want a
and
V6.
it was-
And that's only.
So that's there.
And we keep saying
There's some
we
alignment
keep
there.
saying $400,000. These cars, I guarantee you, all those people who are holding on to it for 2 years, oh yeah, I'm gonna do everything, are just going to sell it immediately.
with
They're
the-
going to be $1 million. You
Yeah.
think that car's worth $1 million?
Well, so if it doesn't sound like
oh
400
my
grand, it doesn't
goodness!
sound
No,
like
it
a
doesn't
million.
sound like $1 million.
So RX-7s and RX-8s, okay, rotary. But
Yeah.
you know, even if you put a nice exhaust on, they still sound like a rotary.
They-
you love
yeah.
it or you hate it, fine. You know,
They idle.
So-
So John, would you rather
the
pay
FRS, for example, I didn't really think AEs sounded great. I mean, that four-cylinder.
No, they
No,
don't.
4AGEs sound really good for four cylinders.
Especially if you drop a 20 valve.
There's something about the like cam load separation or
Yeah.
something. They have a really
There's
really
very
cool
few
So
tone.
cylinders that
FRSs
sound
are kind
amazing.
of, they sound like a Subaru.
Yes, well they are. So
well,
yeah,
because they are.
yeah.
But I mean, you know, when you look at all the other cars, like the Supra, I guarantee you when they build the new one, you're never going to sound as good as a 2J.
Well,
Sound
and
like a
especially-
B58, which is a BMW motor. It sounds
especially
okay, actually.
especially if they're using BMW's straight six as
Yeah,
a
they're
going to
use
doing,
they're going to use the
because
B58.
because the current BMW straight sixes don't sound that great
The
either.
B58 sounds
So-
better than the S55.
so do you think-
Interestingly
so-
enough, I don't know why that is. I don't know
So
why the
here's the
340i sounds better
So
than the M3.
we basically we see the prestige of saying a car has been Nuremberg tested,
Yeah.
but we don't necessarily any of us really care because I think it's catering to people that always wanted to drive on the Nuremberg and never did. They think if they buy a car that was tested there, somehow they're bringing the Nuremberg with them.
Well,
and
there's
then
that.
they go and drive to work in it in
then
automatic mode.
It appeals to
so,
those guys, but it also appeals to the guys who like to talk about their cars.
Sure.
I'm not one of those guys.
Well,
I like to just drive mine.
yeah. Oh, I know so many people that own Caymans.
But
or
yeah, how many
Boxsters
guys
that are
guys
like,
go,
oh, I have
my
the
car
S,
did the
and
Nurburgring in this long.
I
Oh, my car did in this. Like,
I bought the
And
blah blah
guess,
blah.
and guess what?
sport
You
car
weren't
I got.
driving it at that point.
That's right. And if
the
you
guy-
did, you could add 3 minutes to that
Because there's
time.
a woman who drives a minivan that drives Sabine.
My
Sabina
biggest
Schmitz,
my
yeah.
biggest problem is
Yeah.
now is that automakers so people want the sports car or whatever, and then they're like, yeah, but I also just want an SUV because
So-
it's tall,
so
right?
how much-
So then they make these stupid cars
Also,
like the X5M.
No,
Now
the
they're-
X6.
But now they're adding 5,
All right, I'm
4,
drawing
5,
the line at
600
SUVs.
horsepower
Okay?
SUVs.
So here's the thing. So Nürburgring, not that big a deal.
No.
The look of the
Not-
car
not
is
to
obviously
us.
important.
Not to us. Not to
The
us,
look
I
of the
guess.
car is obviously more important because you said.
Are you making a bigger point actually in just saying that enthusiasts in general don't care about Nürburgring numbers? Like real enthusiasts? Like real driving
I think everybody's
No,
got
I
to
think
speak. I
some
think
of them
everybody's going
do.
to speak for themselves because you can't generalize.
I think
but-
people
For
on
the
the
most part.
internet. I
But-
think
but
people
here's-
on the internet love to let people know that they know how fast
Their car did run the Nürburgring.
Oh well, you said this car is really quick. But I know
Yeah.
that this car actually went around the Nürburgring
With the same driver.
with 3 seconds
So
faster.
here's the last of it.
Yeah, we're 13 miles. Big.
Yeah, how many minutes have we been going?
But anyway, so the Nürburgring doesn't matter. Obviously, looks matter to everybody. You want
Yeah.
a car. So if
If you don't look back at me, you walk away.
if you want a car that's a modern representation of an icon, you probably want it to look like the original icon a little bit. So,
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think the R35 was basically designed by the guy who did Gundam Wing. So I mean,
Yes.
And I think if you want a car to be
I've warmed to the
valuable,
look of it a little bit. Other than it's
But this is
doesn't
why
have
I
a
said.
battle
That's
tank
why I
or
said
whatever.
if it was a standalone car, going way back, it would be great. It'd be fine. But to follow that lineage,
But this is another point. I think I would have no problem with the NSX if it wasn't called the NSX.
oh, if it was just
If
called
the
something
new car
else.
was the RSX,
yeah, or
bring
whatever
that
else.
back. Okay.
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
a new
Okay.
RSX with a manual
But anyway,
hatch.
so here's the other thing. So basically, performance figures aside, and Nürburgring numbers aside, and the looks are going to matter. Looks are the first thing everybody.
Yeah.
So exhaust, the way the car sounds when you drive it, the visceral part
Yeah.
of the experience.
Yeah.
Porsche owners, for example, I don't think they get that much of a sound with a lot of their
the
cars.
new
These
one,
days, no.
turbocharged,
The air-cooled ones,
turbocharged
absolutely.
one.
Yeah.
No, well, 997s they sound.
But
Well, yeah, what I'm
but-
saying.
I'm saying the turbocharged
Staying
ones.
within the market. So, like I said, the new NSX, the sound of the exhaust.
Yeah, it doesn't sound good.
We talk about this probably all the time, but I find it funny how much we talk about it.
Yeah.
The fact that what's your favorite sounding car?
Of like what's currently available.
all of them.
Anything.
It's always V10s.
And it's always
V10s.
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 Yeah.
The
It's like-
Gallardo,
it's
the
like
E60
the
M5s.
E60 M5,
Yeah.
the LFA, the Carrera GT.
The
Best-
R8 V10.
and
same-
the R-
same
and
as
the- and the
Gallardo.
Huracan.
It's so
Huracan.
sad. It's so
Those
sad.
are the best sounding
It's
cars.
so
Yeah.
sad that the Viper never gets mentioned.
Because it's a 360 with 2 extra
It
cylinders,
sounds-
and that's what it sounds
It
sound like
sounds
a V10.
unique. It sounds cool. It's just
Well,
I wouldn't call it the best
unique
sounding
isn't
car of all
always
time.
the winner.
Yeah, and that's exactly.
But as far
There's
as
a lot of single
third
unique.
eye.
it's not a bad. It's not a bad sounding car. I don't think there's ever been a bad. I mean, maybe the Ford Excursion.
But I'll tell you, like
Maybe that
it's
didn't
funny
sound
because
good.
we've had this conversation. I definitely want to come back and do this as a topic later, which is what cars would you buy with lotto money? We always talk about it, and I swear that one of my favorites is the LFA. And one of the only reasons I like Lexus, but one of the only reasons I buy it is because I would literally. I could be in the worst mood and walk in the
Just
garage
lift the
and,
gas.
and fire it up, and warm up, and whip it a couple times. I'd be like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm ready to start my day.
That was just that
like
was
I
such a
couldn't
good
imagine a car. I don't care where you live. That wouldn't your day would be better just driving that to work.
It's interesting you say that because I've actually launched like 2 different YouTube pages at the same time and just listened to like straight pipe V60 V8 or V10s,
E60 M5.
M5 V10s, and then LFAs, and just listen to them. They're different, but obviously they sound the same.
Yeah, the
as the-
M5 is a little deeper.
It's more German. It's more. It has that more.
It doesn't rev as quick. It has
No.
like a low. It has a low end that the LFA.
It has like a
doesn't
little
have.
more.
I mean, it's
blunt.
also way cheaper.
Well, the LFA's displacement versus most other V10s like the Carrera GT.
What is the LFA
smaller.
displacement?
The LFA is 5.2, isn't it? Or 4.8.
4.8.
And
The the
it's
5
5.0.
is 5.
Yeah.
5.0. It's
Yeah.
not that different. And
And
the
LFA
Carrera
is-
GT was
the
a
LFA is a
5.2.
lot less to try to murder you like the Carrera.
I think
What?
the Carrera GT sounds a little more like the LFA. It just doesn't have that same revy characteristic because it's not
Well,
that.
so do
five
you
Yeah.
think the
pedal.
sound is appealing? So here's a good one. Do you think the sound is appealing to everyone here because we're Formula One fans?
I don't watch.
Because it sounds
It
like
is
when
very
Formula
similar.
One cars sound
Yeah,
good.
new
Well,
Formula
and-
One. Yeah, when they
And
were
actually,
good.
if you think about it, when people compare, when people describe V10 sounds, they go, "It sounds like an F1 car."
car.
So
But
yeah.
what's funny is
which they don't
think
anymore.
about
yeah.
think about the cars that really were the iconic cars, and they were
Aventador. Aventador sounds good. That's a V12.
It does, but
Zonda that sounds
Lamborghinis
really
do.
good.
They
V12.
do, but
Mercedes.
it's a different thing.
You gotta straight pipe those because they're not that
So
loud.
what I'm saying is, like, if you look at the Senna generation cars, because he drove more than just those cars. but
Yeah.
The V6, I think it was 1.5 liter.
Yeah.
Yeah,
V6,
those
1,200 horsepower.
Yeah.
Little moped pistons.
Yeah.
Screaming around the speed of light.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And a car that was basically the equivalent of a milk carton.
Well, the 05 V10 era cars were unbelievable.
Yeah, and they
as well.
and it was just like the rev, and you realize that was not the dark ages, but now the cars, how many G's can you pull in a modern Formula 1 car?
Sure, the old ones,
But
now it's all about fuel economy. I don't want my race series to be about fuel economy.
Right,
I want
right.
it to be about
I
the
don't care,
most
neither
power
do
you
you.
can possibly make out of an
Yeah.
engine. That's what racing
Well, and
is.
this is a whole other topic because I feel like F1 as a
It's
sanctioning
horrible.
body has lost its way.
it.
But
Dumb.
yeah,
It's horrible.
but if you listen to kind of bring it back to what you say, if you watch or listen to V10 era F1 races, it is like
The beast. It's
so
the bee's
cool
knees.
to listen to. Yeah,
It's the bee's knees.
it's mind numbing. Just hearing them all like whip by, it's
But,
like, oh man.
I mean, but with a lot of cars like that, I think everything matters. Everybody has a different thing.
Yeah.
What they're looking for.
I don't know if it's because of F1. I mean, it could be.
So
I just think good sounding
I'm-
engines sound good, and I think
I'm the
there's
oldest
still
guy.
good
I'm the
sounding.
oldest guy here. So
Yeah.
let me ask you this:
There's still good
So,
sounding cars in the market today.
what car from your childhood
Yeah.
do you really want, or have you owned it?
What car from my childhood did I realize that I don't?
Well,
have owned?
maybe you owned it, maybe you didn't.
Well, if
He's the poor guy who's not going to be able to come up with one of these.
Yeah, if you go back to like when I was like a toddler, I would say a Countach or like a Diablo.
Well,
Everybody,
toddler.
I think every
Diablo.
Yeah, but like who didn't have a Countach?
every '80s kid had
Yeah.
that Alpine red, Countach.
Countach on the wall, yeah. I had
Cannonball
one in
Run,
white and one in red.
Cannonball
yeah.
Run,
Yeah.
I'm
So
a little
Countach,
younger
But
than
that's
you
good.
guys.
Yeah.
My buddy always says Lamborghini, that era car, Lamborghinis are every kid's dream and every owner's nightmare.
Nightmare, yeah.
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 Not anymore though. Now
What, so what about you? What about cars from your
I mean,
5 minutes ago when you were?
I
Yeah,
guess you
from
could say
yesterday
when I
when
was
you were
real young, Gallardo, but when I was, or not a guy, Diablo.
Yeah.
But when I was,
Chrysler's Lamborghini.
but when I was a little older, I wanted a Gallardo, and I've driven them since then, and it's not that great. But I would take, if I could get a rear-wheel drive manual Gallardo, which does exist. It's
My
just
buddy
very-
has one.
It's just a very.
Yes.
I was holding off on driving a Gallardo because I knew that I would be disappointed by the all-wheel drive E-Gear one.
He's got.
And I said, I want to drive a manual rear-wheel drive one,
Manual
and
rear-wheel drive.
I knew the opportunity was never going to come up, so I just took the E-Gear one. I hated it, but I still think if I could have any car in the world, I would have a
like a Superleggero.
I would have a Balboni. I would have a
Yeah,
Balboni
yeah.
edition.
It's a but it's like a Volkswagen now.
It's not.
No, it's a rear-wheel
there's
drive
nothing.
V10 560
Yeah,
horsepower car with a gated manual transmission
Yeah.
and a freaking cool stripe.
I think-
it's the stripe that sells
That's what
it.
makes it
That's-
cool.
so that is my ultimate car. If I could have any car in the world, maybe it would be a Carrera GT and then that.
Wait, any car in the world or any car from your childhood?
Like
in the
the
world?
Carrera GT was. I was in fourth grade when
You
the.
gotta forget it, man.
I was in fourth grade when the Carrera GT came out. So
What's
yeah.
funny is
You want to know something weird and somewhat morbid? I actually want a Carrera GT more now that Paul Walker died.
I know, I do too.
Than I did before.
It's such a legendary thing now. It's like
you know what I think it is though. I think everybody feels a connection to Paul, and especially guys in the car world.
Yeah.
But I think it's we want to know that we can drive it and live.
Yeah, live. That is exactly what it is.
And
I'm like, I don't
how many
understand
of
what
those
the
cars
problem
have you
is.
seen, like vaporized, like total coke?
no, I mean,
There's a lot of them. You know, I mean, but anyway, with me, I kind of own it. Like I remember, I still have pictures
Yeah.
of.
What are those?
well, you were what 40 when the
Photograph.
NSX came out?
Well, let's see. I graduated in 1985, so
Oh my
I
gosh.
was in my 20s when that car came out, and I remember. Yeah, give me a hole. But anyway, I remember. It's okay. It's like the first time I went and I saw one in real life, I went to the Philadelphia International Auto Show.
Yeah, I've been to that show.
And I went to it, and I'm looking at these. They had Lamborghinis and all this other stuff. And I remember they had an anniversary edition Countach
that white,
year.
that ugly with all the fenders.
Yeah.
Oh god,
And
awful.
they had an LMO2 there,
Yeah.
and I'm looking at them, and I
Those
walk,
are cool.
and I walk
Those
by,
are
and I
super
remember
cool. They
and
were valueless
and they
for
had,
most years.
They had a NSX, a red NSX, of course.
Yeah.
Right. NSX, factory, nothing. It was brand new, right? Brand new car, and next to it in a display, they had this engine out of it, like the engine out.
Yeah.
And it was all chrome, and they plated everything.
I've seen pictures of that. Yeah.
And I'm looking at this thing, and I'm just going, wow. And I talked to the guy, the rep that was there at Acura, and it's like, this car is, and he said to me, this is the best thing to come to the automotive industry in a long time. And obviously, he
worked for Honda, yeah.
But he
yeah,
says,
for Acura, yeah.
he goes, it's everything you want in a supercar with all the reliability of a Japanese car.
Yeah.
And it's a million years later, and he's still right.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's cars. I find myself liking cars now for different reasons.
Yeah.
There's Porsche, which we'll throw them into the mix for a second. Porsche had a commercial. I forget whatever it was, but they said the 911.
Yeah.
There's the day you first see one. There's the day you first own one. And there's the nauseating amount of time in between.
Yeah.
Porsche did one of the
Greatest
best.
marketing
Porsche
message.
did one of the best commercials I think I've ever seen. I think it was in Britain that they ran this commercial. This kid is sitting in the back of the classroom.
Yeah, that's the commercial.
Yeah, and he just sees a 911 go
And he
by.
rides the bike to the dealer.
Rides his bike to the
Yeah.
dealer, and he
sits in the
sits
car.
The salesman lets him sit in it, and he's like, "Can I have your business card?" He takes it, and he's like, "I'll be back."
And he- yeah,
I'll see you in 20 years.
Yeah,
It's
it's
just
something like that.
Well, that, and there's an old, it was for the 964, I think, so it would have had to have been the late 80s, early 90s. Porsche ad. It's just a print ad that was in a magazine. And it's a picture of the 964, which I think was then new at the time, just entering a corner, so it's still kind of 3/4 C with the wheels turned. And it says, honestly, have you ever sat and dreamed about a Lexus or whatever?
Yeah,
like,
no,
oh my god!
I remember back when Risky Business, Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was his first film or it was one of his first films.
Yeah,
And
it's close.
he has this father, he jacks his dad's 928 out of the garage while they're away on
Yeah.
vacation, and it's manual, and he drag races people, and he's outrunning a pimp and all this, and he outruns everybody and pulls into his driveway, and he just looks at the camera and goes, Porsche, there is no substitute. So I don't know, that's one of the chicken and the egg things, because I don't know if Porsche said that first, or he said it, and then Porsche just ran with it.
Yeah, who knows?
Because I always think of that.
Well,
Great marketing.
I had a question. So now that we were talking about cars that we lusted over at our respective young ages, what was the car that when you were just learning to drive, when you were like 16, that you wanted, like that you thought was reasonable, but it really wasn't? It was just a little, but like that you would have wanted to be your first car. Because I know mine.
You know what's crazy? I wanted an NSX for the first time I saw one, but I was older.
Yeah,
So
no. So when
I was a kid,
so I know what mine was. I wanted so bad. They were too expensive at the time. I wanted a Golf R32. I wanted one of those so bad.
when he
cool.
talked about something like that's like 5 minutes ago.
yeah, he said when I was 16 yesterday.
Well,
yeah. No,
yeah.
so I had a really...
It wasn't
this is-
yesterday. It was
was last week.
almost a decade.
The weird thing for me is actually at the time I always wanted to E30 M3, but I didn't know what they were until I got older. My mom's boss took
Should
me
have bought
for
when you were younger.
well,
for 10 grand.
and never sold it.
my mom's boss took me for a ride in one when they were new, when I was like an infant,
Yeah.
Well, no, I wasn't that young, but very young. So I didn't know what they were. I just remember the look
You
of the
pulled
car.
the pacifier in your mouth. I'm like, wow.
I was like, wow. No, like it was. I remember the look of the car as I got older. I figured out what it was, but I didn't know what this car was when I was 16 yet. I still didn't know what generation, whatever it was. So the car for me that I wanted really bad, and you guys are gonna laugh, But you're from you lived in the New York area at some point.
We grew up almost in the same place.
Okay,
We grew up in
you-
Philly.
Okay, Philly. Well, there's more of a New York Italian thing, so you'll probably get it.
Okay.
But I
The
wanted
Eldorado.
an IROC in the worst
Oh,
way, and I got one.
I thought you were
had-
going to say a Fiero.
I
I
had
thought you were
five.
going to say
I had
Fiero.
five.
I knew
IROCs.
exactly what he said.
I thought it was. I thought it was
an
going to be a
F-bomb.
Trans. I
knew.
thought Trans Am.
I-
Actually,
yeah,
when you
that's
said
what I
that,
thought.
I thought it was going to be a Trans Am.
Yeah. If it
But
was
okay,
Jersey,
you
it'd be
wanted
Trans
to-
Am.
oh, yeah.
No, yeah.
No, Philly was the
Oh.
Trans Am. was
Dude,
the
every
cool-
cool
Firebird.
Italian guy in New York had an IROC, and I was like, I gotta have one of these things so bad. In manual, of
The
course.
weird thing is, like what you were saying, I actually owned it. The car
yeah.
I dreamt about, it was one of the first cars I ever owned.
Did you own it when you were 16 though?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, I was like 18.
Oh, well, okay,
Um,
close enough. Whatever.
But I got a 77 Smoking the Bandit edition Trans Am.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I mean, at that era, you were either like, it was weird is I remember.
That was back when insurance
I was
like let you have a car
I'm
like
gonna-
that.
I'm going to date myself here for a bit, but I was 10, and I remember going to see Smoking the Bandit and Star Wars the same summer.
Oh wow, that's great. What a summer!
And I thought the world had ended. Like this couldn't get any better than that.
There's no cooler summer
And then
that
when
will
you
ever
saw-
happen.
And then years later,
You could buy a Trans Am, you can't buy
and
Millennium.
years later
Yeah.
to get. And what's funny is it's like unfortunately, an old F-White Trans Am is like one of those "don't meet your heroes" kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now
yeah.
they're valuable, but you wouldn't have known that back then.
It's one of those things where you're like, it was a horrible car.
Yeah.
I mean, things broke in sequence.
Yeah.
Like the motor blew up, I replaced it. The transmission blew up, and the diff.
The
blew
diff
up.
went out,
It-
yeah.
And, in its defense, I
70
wasn't
GM.
being gentle.
Yeah. Well,
But-
no, your marketing,
Yeah.
the marketing for you with that car was Smoking the Bandit.
Yeah.
So you're out there,
Yeah, give me a bridge to jump.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
But what's funny is, over time, like there's cars that when they came out, I never cared about, and there's cars that like now, and you probably agree with me when I say it's like 550 Maranellos.
Dude,
Yeah,
I
I
actually
For some
like
those.
those.
reason, I
They're
just get
cool.
fuzzy about
575s
those
too.
575s.
Oh, don't get me started about my favorite Ferrari.
But I
The
remember-
456.
But when I was
Love
growing up,
that thing.
I had some friends that had a lot more money than I did, and I got to go in a lot of really cool 80s cars.
Yeah.
Testarossas, 308s. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say a 308 was a cool car from the 80s, but it was a horrible car from the 80s. But
It was new, it was
Testarossas are
cool.
still cool.
Yeah.
But it's like getting back to the topic. The cars from your youth. Everybody should have one.
Yeah.
Like you should at least have.
I don't
the
want a 350Z anymore. I don't want a 350Z.
It's a really good car.
That's
I've driven it. I don't like it.
That's actually where all my money went. Like, as soon as I started making decent money, it didn't go to, like, having the best clothes. It didn't go, or the newest clothes. Like, it didn't go to, like, having, like, all the new video games I wanted. It went to my cars, all of it.
But I don't think it's been long enough for me. So like a 350Z, like
Yeah.
I'd rather have
But it's like-
a 370Z or
it's like-
an
it's-
FRS
it's like-
or
it's
a
like
Mustang.
don't meet your
like,
heroes.
I'd rather have a new.
Well,
You
so
should meet your heroes because you can find out if Brad Pitt's a cool dude or
Yeah.
or, you can I've been incredibly lucky with my car, and it's why I would sell it.
I always wanted a Chrysler Crossfire.
What?
This is before I had ever
Are you
driven a car.
drunk?
And
This
that's-
is all before I had ever driven a car.
just
This
on
is,
looks.
this is, this is
And
before
now
I
I'm-
had
now
ever
I'm gonna feel like
driven
talking
a
on
car.
that disappointment.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not- I think we're over anyway, aren't
But
we?
but I mean, the long short is, I like it. I'm going to keep it, and it was a good experience. It doesn't happen for everybody. If you
The
would have had a
Trans Am?
350, well, no.
Oh,
I
that-
still
that's
kind of have a
But
soft
if-
spot for
if-
the Crossfire.
But if you had one, you would. But
Exactly.
I mean, I think car companies should at least take a little heed to the stuff that you should try to make. If you're going to use the name, be loyal to what it was.
I completely agree with that.
I agree with that,
Yeah,
and
completely agree with
my
that.
sort of final closing on that issue is if you want a car to be valuable for a long period of time, make it timeless. Don't make it of its time.
But the problem is that auto manufacturers don't care about the car's value after the initial
No,
sale.
yeah,
they just don't care.
Well,
So,
but
Yeah.
true. But I mean, think about all the cars that are trying to be the past now. The Mustang looks like an old Mustang.
And how-
no, not as much. That was back in like 2005.
But still, that was
That was a new
That was
design
the
language.
Plymouth.
The
That was the
Challenger.
Plymouth Prowler.
the Challenger,
Yeah,
for example.
yeah.
Well, the Challenger, Dodge doesn't know how to build a 4-cylinder turbocharged engine, so let's just
but-
build. I
but-
love Dodge.
but
Well, they
that's
do
okay.
when they're Mitsubishi.
You know, but what I'm saying is, I think everybody should at least try to, at least once in their life, drive the car that they wanted when they were a kid.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll
absolutely.
like it, sometimes you,
And
sometimes
and
it's
I'll tell you
crossfire.
something. I'll tell you something. I've had people come up to me and go, "Oh, an NSX, it's fine. I've wanted that car forever." I'm like, "You don't know what forever is. You're
Yeah.
18, you know."
Yeah.
And you take them out for
You
a
run the car
ride,
for
or
2
you take
weeks.
a ride in the Skyline, or you go out, take people out for cars that are iconic.
Yeah.
And you know, I feel lucky enough to own it. You know, but it's like when you share that experience with somebody, I think too many people don't care about cars, and I think the people who do care about cars should at least be able to make a conscious decision if they're right about what they wanted when they were a
I
kid.
will say that I've gotten the opportunity to at least drive almost every car I've ever wanted to drive. And in doing that, I do find that I will go, okay, this car came out in 1986.
Do you get jaded?
And then, no, I just have to remind myself that it's not going to be, I have to remind myself of what I expected it to be then and not what it is compared to cars now, because you'll get disappointed.
Yeah, new cars are
You're just not,
better.
Yeah, I
Most
mean,
of the time.
you just can't, it's nearly, with very few exceptions, and they exist, it's nearly impossible to get impressed by an old car now. If, like, you're looking for specific
R34
feelings.
GTR did it.
Nearly.
I drove that expecting, I said, there's no way that the R34 GTR could possibly live up to the hype, and it
Well, see, that's a different statement, though, isn't it? You said the
exceeded.
hype. I'm talking about your own personal.
No, well,
Yeah.
I thought, I was like, I bet you, because I had driven an R34 GTT, and I was like, this kind of just feels like a Maxima, and the R34.
Yeah.
Go Maxima.
It felt like a turbocharged Maxima, and
Every kid on earth that wants an R34.
The
just wants to beat
GTR
you to death right now.
Yeah.
was not. The GTR did it. I was amazed.
The weird thing about I've owned a few, having owned those cars is the people that see you on the road and almost crash into you and cause car accidents and start taking pictures are blowing you away. But anyway, if anybody has any ideas for topics for us to discuss, let us know.
Submit them.
And we'll go from there. Thanks, guys.
Awesome.
Thank
We'll
you.
talk next
Thank you,
time.
John.
All right.